Morning everyone, Graham Healy reporting, the voice as some people call me. Look, this book here, get a long look at that. It's Globalization, the Demise of the Australian Nation by Graham L.Strachan, Bachelor of Science, a lawyer as well, a barrister. He was, I don't know whether Graham's still with us today, but certainly his book is. And this book was written in Brisbane, Australia, September 1998. I recommend that you purchase, if you can, they're very hard to get. I purchased my copy in about 1999, I think. I did a series of videos on Healy's NoMoreBS.com regarding globalisation. Now, I'll just read you a little bit out of this, see what's happening at the moment. Look, forget the coronavirus, as those who basically know what they're talking about, I suppose, or on the leading edge. I won't say, on the leading edge, this is what I'd say. We already know that the coronavirus was produced in the biolab in Wuhan. The Communist Party in China is trying to cover everything up like you wouldn't believe. Our Australian politicians are both sides of politics, but certainly it's laughable when you hear them now defending, or rightly so, I suppose, but defending the implication that communist China is now going to screw over Australia by not sending any Asian students, or not buying any beef cattle, or, all that sort of stuff. So they're now, through soft power, they've been doing, the Chinese communists, not only killed 70 million of their own people, they are spreading a network through the Belt and Road soft power approach, of which the Premier of Victoria signed up to illegally and in trespass of the national interests of Australia. Talking about national interest, I mean, the part I think is complete hypocrisy and it's just laughable. You've got to be brain dead and absolutely stupid if you don't think for 1 minute that both sides of politics, well, Labor's worse, but Liberals are doing the same thing by stealth, are selling out to the communists. Our key assets have been sold to the communists. Now, don't come to me and say that, oh, that's just a Chinese company. You're dealing with a communist regime who controls, at any stroke of a pen or any command, they control all commercial interests that are anchored in communist China. The only person to take the communists on, basically, was Donald Trump. Now, when I look at Donald Trump's old videos when he was interviewed, especially one when he was interviewed by a BBC journalist back in 1986, go onto YouTube and have a look at it. It's an interview, Donald Trump, a young Donald Trump, 1986, with the BBC, and basically the whole interview was all about what's happening, or the demise of America. Mind you, the demise of Australia was happening at the same time. Australia has probably a couple, 2 or 3 year lag time on what's happening in the US. Okay? So Donald Trump, the emphasis I said here is Donald Trump basically was outlining everything he's doing today in that interview with the BBC journalist in 1986. Go onto YouTube, have a look at it, and there it is. It's all outlined. He was talking about the bad trade deals back then, how America was losing on every front, and they were basically win-lose deals. In other words, America was losing money big time, and the countries such as Communist China and other communist countries were actually taking advantage of, I suppose, America's basic good nature in these deals. Now, one thing, when you read this book, if you get hold of it, Globalism, the demise of the Australian nation. What Graham L.Strachan does is actually outline what globalism is. Right? I'll read you a couple excerpts from this book so that you'll be able to understand a little bit clearer. Now, regarding the coronavirus, look, there's less deaths with the coronavirus than the common flu. This has all been blown out of complete proportion. Totally. And many medical doctors, I mean, I'm doing medical science at university, and look, I understand the cleanliness and I suppose the quarantine factors and all this sort of thing. However, the quarantining of this particular virus has just gone to an unreal level. Based on what? Based on what facts? Based on what medical tests that have actually been done on flu viruses equivalents? Based on what figures? I mean, the bottom line is, for goodness sake, the common flu kills far more people than the coronavirus. Did anyone lock down the country and stop the economy over the flu? You know, this is blown right out of proportion, and what you've got to do is you've got to look beyond this smoke screen. And the smoke screen is this: the economy of Australia and globally was on a pathway of a huge train crash. As the economist John Adams says, who I follow, John Adams, Martin North, and various others that you'll see on my website, healysnumberbs.com, you'll see that these economists have been predicting a collapse, like a housing bubble collapse. You know, we're in serious debt. I think Australia was in $2.5 trillion of debt before any coronavirus hit us. So the big issue is debt. So what it looks like, you know, when I read you a couple excerpts out of this book, you'll sort of, you'll wake up to it. What it looks like is the coronavirus has been used as a cover to cover what the economic crisis was happening anyhow. So if the coronavirus didn't come out of Wuhan biolabs in China, which was going to be a strategic thing that the Chinese did, and just a little caveat, when I'm talking about China, I'm not talking about Asian people. We love Asian people, especially in Australia. We've got Chinatown, Chinese food. I've been 15 years as a martial arts, or 20 years or 30 years as a martial arts instructor. I love the Orient, I love the Oriental people. We're talking about, when I say China, I'm talking about the totalitarian communist regime that has murdered 70 million of its own people. So just get that very, very clear. I'm not talking about Chinese people. We love Chinese people. Okay. And the more Chinese people we have in Australia that settle here and call Australia home, the better, as far as I'm concerned. You know, if we've got a Chinese restaurant in every corner in this country, Indian restaurant in every corner of this country as well, I'll just throw that in because Chinese and Indian food are my favourite food. Okay, and lovely people too. It's the communist regime, a bit like it was in Germany, you know, with the Nazi regime that started off, believe it or not, started off as communists and just went more nationalistic and became a fascist party. But it's all tied back to communism. So I have a few little debates with young people these days about the roots of socialism. And I'll tell you this, no matter which historical movement you look at, socialism leads to communism. Or, as we say, a socialist is a communist in waiting. Now, what the Chinese Communist Party has done, they've done a very subtle manipulation worldwide through the Belt and Road strategy. In such, what they've done is strategically controlled key assets financially. Now, that was a big mistake from the Bush and Obama era in the US, where they sent the companies, the US companies, to China to get stuff done cheap. And I'll make a comment on that in a second. And as a result, they gave China a lot of financial power worldwide. Right? Now, this is what's happened over those last 30 years or 40 years. This is a quick version. I don't want to get you bored. At the end of the day, 2020, all that the mistakes made by the previous administrations, both in Australia, government instrumentations in Australia and the US before Trump, is simply this: they have empowered the communists. I'll just repeat that. They have empowered the communists. All that's happened, you now have a wealthy communist party. You haven't changed communism. You've actually developed a wealthy worldwide net or web of the communist regime, that their mentality is, they want to take over the world, as simple as that. And they're doing that through the Belt and Road. We've got politicians in this country, any Labor, especially Queensland, that's put that Palachuk, as I call her, has put Queensland seriously in debt. And all the Labor group suck up to China publicly, and especially down in Melbourne, which I really have renamed as a province of China, the Premier of Victoria should be tried for treason. And, to wrap that up, old ScoMo and Frydenberg are not much better. As a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say the Liberal Party and the National Party are involved in trade-offs with Communist China, have been involved for the last 30 years. They're not an opposition. They're on the same side, not quite as public as Labor, but they're doing the same dirty deals with communists and other global trading partners, so to speak, in a win-lose situation for Australia. And how is a win-lose situation for Australia? Just look at the assets they've sold off over the last 30 to 40 years. Electricity and water should never, ever be put on the stock market, or should it be sold off to any transnational corporation. So-called privatisation. It's ridiculous. And not only ridiculous, it has plummeted Australia into this vulnerable situation we are now in, where the supply chains rely on third world countries, not only China, but other third world countries. That shouldn't be. I'll give you a scenario in a second. But look, let's get back to globalism, the demise of the Australian nation, which basically, almost prophetically, Graham L.Strachan outlined what was going to happen to Australia back in 1998 when he wrote the book, and I can imagine he was putting this together probably about 20 years before that, because it all started in 1975 with the Lima Declaration. Now, I've got a lot of my associates going on about the Lima Declaration. Actually, I've done videos on it, and it went to the back recesses of my mind, and then this book brought it back. I'll just quickly read this to you so you're updated. Get the book, do some research on the internet, and it'll get you up to date. The Lima Declaration. In 1975, the Whitlam government adopted a program of the Lima Declaration, a product of the UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. The United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Basically, it said that the developed countries, including Australia, were to transfer finance, technological, capital, and even whole industries to third world countries, i.e. China, and a bid to boost their development. It also committed participating nations to the removal of tariffs. You know what the removal of tariffs mean? That's Donald Trump's reinstated tariffs in the United States. The removal of tariffs in Australia destroyed the cattle industry, destroyed the sugar industry, destroyed the wool industry. Our prime industries, it destroyed it. They're dead. They're on life support now, thank you to the policies of the Whitlam government for a start, and the continuation of it by both sides of politics, right up to old Slow-Mo and Frydenberg. They've been doing this all the way along. They're still involved with the UN protocols. They're still involved with all these agendas. They're still selling out prime assets to the Communist Party and or other parties that haven't got the national interests of Australia to the forefront. Wake up, Australia. It's a ride. I've been talking about this for 10 years. Other associates that I've got have been talking about this for 10 years. We're banging on about it, and we've been called conspiracy theorists and all this. The reality is we've actually seen what's happening before it's happened. Now, 2020, the coronavirus has just ripped off the mask, and here we are behind the mask, behind the lockdowns, behind all this non-medical factual BS in many respects, because there isn't any tests that can prove that you all got to get injections, a flu injection, and we'll inject you with all sorts of stuff. Go on the internet and just have a look at what sort of things they're injecting you with. Then go and see what sort of double-blind tests they've done on these so-called injections they're using, and from what companies are manufacturing them, and where are those countries? Where are those manufacturing plants in what countries? Better examine that very carefully. I've got nothing against being inoculated for single things like mumps and chicken pox and stuff like that we were inoculated back in the 60s and 50s and that. However, these days they just put a whole lot of it's like a cocktail mix in hypodermic syringes and stick that into your child, and then next minute your child's got all sorts of issues, or some of them pass away according to the statistics. That's another issue. All right, so getting back to this here, as I say, where are we? Third world countries, in a bid to boost their development, it also committed participating nations to the removal of tariffs and other barriers to the importation of third world products into countries, even if it meant putting local farmers and other producers out of business. Just what they've done in Australia. It wasn't just the drought. It wasn't just the bushfires. It wasn't just the coronavirus. But systematically, the politics of Australia, the politicians on both sides of the continuum and in the current government, have been starving out our farmers. They have been dismantling our national assets. They've been selling off stuff progressively over the last 40 years, and here we are, folks. Enjoy the lockdown. The real impact's going to come on the 30th of June, where you've basically got a financial global crisis looming. Price of oil has gone to negative $40 a barrel. That's never happened in our lifetime. The petrodollar has just crashed. So things are happening, folks. Things are happening. Now, I'll just read a little bit of, we'll go back to the privatisation bonanza. A little bit more of Graham L.Strachan's book, Globalisation of the Australian Economy, or Demise of the Australian Economy. Privatisation bonanza. Economic rationalism requires a further or progressive sale of all Australian public assets and utilities to transnational and global investors. Major privatisation sales since 1990 have been Telstra, Airports, the Commonwealth Bank, SGIG Insurance, Sit Power Victoria, Powercor Victoria, Eastern Energy Victoria, Solaris Power Victoria, SA Water, Bank West WA, United Energy Victoria, Qantas, Bank of South Australia, Bank of New South Wales, Tancorp Victoria, Moomba Sydney Pipeline, Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, Gladstone Power Queensland, State Insurance Office Victoria, Government Insurance. Everything has to go, including ANL Shipping, the Transcontinental Garn Railway, the CSIRO, and ultimately the Snowy River scheme. The only restriction is they are not, now listen to this, they are not to be sold to Australian consortiums. They are not to be sold to Australian consortiums. Now, a mate of mine, Peter Manuel, owns cattle property in South Australia. When the Kidman property station was sold off by Reinhardt, right, there was an Australian consortium, 100% Australian consortium, ready to buy the Kidman station, the biggest cattle station on this country. They were prevented from doing that. And unfortunately, even though I do like a lot of policies from One Nation and Malcolm Roberts and especially Malcolm Roberts in Queensland, but Pauline Hanson agreed to the Chinese Communist Party owning a substantial portion of the Kidman station. They agreed with it. Oh, that's okay. They've only got 40, 50% or whatever it is, 49%, whatever percentage they had of the Kidman station. And Pauline, unfortunately, I know for a fact that an Australian consortium was ready to buy the Kidman station and keep it as an Australian asset. And you voted against it. Unfortunately, you know, I would really like to say this. Please practice what you preach and look into things very carefully before you talk about them in that respect. Anyhow, if you're pro-Australian, go right down the line. No behind-the-scene deals with the Communist Party. All right, that's an important fact. So no matter how attractive the bid, they weren't to sell it to Australian consortiums. Now, if that isn't treason, I don't know what is. And as a result of this policy, and before too much longer, not only economic assets of any significance on the Australian continent will remain within the ownership or control of Australians. That is the aim of globalisation. I'll just read this again. As a result of this policy, i.e. globalisation, you're not allowed for Australian consortiums to buy Australian assets. Can you believe this? Written 1998. Here we are, 2020. No matter how attractive the bid, as a result of this policy, and before too much longer, not one economic asset, I'm a bit like a broken record, but think about it. Not one economic asset of any significance in the Australian continent will remain within the ownership or control of the Australian citizens. That's the aim of globalism. That is the aim of globalism. I'll just repeat it one more time. That is the aim of globalism. And both sides of politics are signed up to this, ladies and gentlemen. 2020, we're here. We've arrived. Donald Trump is changing that in the USA. I've renamed ScoMo Scudmo. You know the Scud missile? He's missiled the Australian economy, what was left of it, and Frydenberg has just sold off, put the rubber stamp on Chinese-controlled assets, and suddenly, after the coronavirus, they're saying, oh, look, we better look at China. You better look at China 20 or 30 years ago. You've been doing the deals, same as everyone else, behind the scenes. Don't try and tell us you haven't. It's on the record. Give us a break. All right, I'll finally, I'm a bit angry actually about all this. Maybe I'm going stir crazy, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I'll read you page 156 of this book. You can go onto Healy's nomorebs.com, or you can go on riseupaustraliabrisbane.com, where I've got an economic outline of where Australia should be going. I was a lead Senate candidate for Rise Up Australia May last year. We put all these policies out, and they weren't new policies, they were the same policies we've been projecting for a long time. Now we're an advocacy group, and this is what I'm advocating for. As the former lead Senate candidate for Rise Up Australia, I'm advocating that we repossess Australia. How's that for an objective? I'm advocating we repossess Australia. Australians should buy back Australia for God's sake. And is Scud Missile Mo, is he the leader of is he a leader of Australia? I hear that his poll ratings are going up. I don't know why that is. Maybe he's paying everyone in the dole with borrowed money. That might be what went up, but I'm telling you, he will be removed shortly, and the quicker the better. I've predicted that Andrew Hastie will take over the Liberal Party. Look, the party politics is finished. I won't go into it in this video, but the whole system is going to be restructured in this country. June 30 is going to be a very dark day as we lead into this economic situation. And then the next dates that I have in my spirit anyhow is August and September for the plan forward. Part of that is repossessing Australia, and the other big part of that is building the Bradford scheme with the signing of a pen, we can get money. Funny about that, isn't it? Remember, and I won't divert on this too much, remember how Abbott got in and then we were all in, there was a financial crisis and everyone had to do the heavy lifting according to Fat Cat Hockey with his cigar. You got to do the heavy lifting. You would think we're in a crisis then. But today, with a stroke of a pen, $200 billion, maybe $400 billion when it's all calculated out correctly, and the bottom end of the scale is being paid out now. The bottom end of the scale is being bailed out. 2007, the top end of the scale, the corrupt banks were being bailed out. Now, 2020, the bottom end of the scale is being bailed out. The issue I'm saying is they're not short of money. A stroke of the pen, $200 billion. Thank you. Oh, you haven't got a job? We'll give you pay. You see what BS and what programming the either side of politicians have put you in to get you to the point where you'll comply. You know, I could do another video on that, but I'll just finish up with this. The end of nationalism. What we've got to do is reinstate nationalism from a perspective that Australia has to be re-sovereigntised. Now, Andrew Hastie's going on about that. He went on about that before the coronavirus situation. I've been going on about this for the last 10 years. All my associates who, I've got political associates, I've got legal associates, I've got medical associates, all that, they all agree. Everyone's been seeing the demise of the Australian nation, and the likes of Bob Catter has outlined it on his websites. He's outlined it historically. You could read his outlines. I've posted them on our websites. He's done a very good account of the demise of the Australian nation. Look, the upside is this. August, September this year, I don't believe the current political system would be in place. There has to be long-term future planning of this country, and all there's been is a short-term destruction for the last 20 to 30, 40, 50 years. Now, we have to reverse it. There's a stop reset coming, and that's going to be the upside of it. Now, I'll just read you this last bit as I sign off. This is about the end of nationalism, or globalism. This is describing it. For the previous 5,000 years, it was by Graham L.Strachan, the tendency has been to lump countries and peoples together into empires. From the Babylonian Empire around 3,500 BC through to the Assyrian Empire and the Macedonian Empire, the Roman Empire around the time of Christ. The Holy Roman Empire during the Middle Ages, the European empires during the 19th century, and the Soviet Empire and the Soviet Union during the 20th centuries, to name just a few, and the Communist Party Empire that we're dealing with right now. That was the way of thinking. Globalism, I'll just repeat this, globalism is an extension of that thinking. The idea that all countries and all people should be lumped together under one world government. The UN agendas, the Lima agendas, the Paris Accords, all that, one world government. In one big global empire. I'll just make a little caveat here. They're non-elected. They're non-elected. Scudmo and Frydenberg, they're all signed up to this and have remained so. Said nothing about it. Remain signed up to the UN Accords, the Paris Agreements, all that. Business as usual, says Scudmo. I'm telling you, business is not going to be as usual in 2020. There's going to be a complete stop reset. Yes, Australia is the lucky country if we re-sovereigntise it. It's been eroded over the last 20 to 30 to 40 years. It's time for the big stop reset. At the end of it, it's going to be a lot better. We're going to go through a very dark rabbit hole leading into June 30. Globalism is an extension of that thinking. The idea that all countries and all people should be lumped together under one world government is in one big global empire. Globalism is not the thinking of the future. Globalism is not the thinking of the future. It is the old empire thinking of the past extended globally. Globalism is the old empire building thinking of the past extended globally. 1998, Graham wrote that book. I did a series of 6 videos on Healy's NoMoreBS.com. You know, I've been banging on about this for 10 years. We're here. The financial collapse and all that sort of stuff, but the real situation, when you have a look at what Donald Trump's doing, Nigel Farage really is the man, not Boris Johnson in UK, Nigel Farage. In Australia, Scudno ain't your man, I'm telling you now. He hasn't got any idea, or maybe he has, but he's all part of the globalist system and has remained linked to that, irrespective of his Hillsong connections. That's another issue. So where we're at now, folks, June 30 is going to be a rabbit hole for Australia and for the rest of the globe. Link onto my website, riseupaustraliabrisbane.com and Healy's NoMoreBS.com. I mean, if you want to educate yourself about the financial situation globally, Healy's NoMoreBS.com has several videos, education videos from Mike Maloney and these various what I call real independent global experts. And I'll just leave this broadcast on this statement. A lot of young people, I mentor because I've physically trained people as not only am I doing medical science at university, chiropractic, but I'm also a master of martial arts as well. Hence the bit of a passionate discussion here today. Now, I mentor a lot of young people, train them, discipline, all that sort of stuff, and they have all these almost leftist opinions based on what they see in the media and all that. And I just say to them, and some not so young ones too, I just say to them, learn by the patterns of historical past. I thoroughly recommend Pray to You videos. I've learned a lot of them personally because they'll get to the point in a very, very short period of time. We want the bottom line. We don't want someone's miscellaneous theory on socialism based on Karl Marx or something. I can go into that with people. However, I'll just finish off this broadcast with this. Please think about historical things. This point in time, we are here right now, right today, April the 29th, Wednesday, April the 29th, 2020. We are in the process of global change. And Scudmo and Frydenberg, it's not going to be business as usual, boys. Whether you guys last much longer, I doubt it. So, for Australia, we have a bright future, but the current governmental system's not working. It's been dysfunctional for many, many years. They've been selling us all, folks. They've been selling us down the road. We're up the proverbial creek in a barbed wire canoe. Why? Not because of the coronavirus, because of the backdoor deals done with a communist regime and other communist regimes and other peoples and entities and businesses that aren't, let's say, in the best interests of the Australian people. I'm not saying the best interests of the government, because they're corrupt, and many of them are corrupt. And I'll say this, I'll leave it on this. Water rights. There's a politician down in New South Wales, a female farmer called Helen Dalton. Keep an eye on her. She's pushing the water rights in the New South Wales Parliament. That's going to bring a lot of parliamentarians unstuck, conflict of interest. They may even get some jail terms out of that one, where they've been selling the water and on the stock market as a commodity, according to the 1975 Lima Declaration. Now your water and probably your oxygen, on the stock market, so that global entities, by the way, just a little caveat before we finish up, transnational corporations still don't pay tax, folks. So all this panic about, where are we going to get our money from? Small to medium business have been debt slaves in this country for the last 40 years. Johnny Howard never changed that. Everyone talks about Johnny Howard being a great Prime Minister. Well, I can go into that. Basically, neither Labor, who's supposed to be the union guys, and Johnny Howard, who's supposed to be for small business, none of them have significantly done anything to relieve the tax burden on small to medium business and wage and salary earners. You guys, including me, are paying 80% of the taxation in this country, 90% of the taxation in this country. It's not a level playing field, folks. It's time to re-level the playing field. It's time for the citizens and the people of Australia to take back Australia. And it's time to make these corrupt, two-faced politicians on both sides of the political scale to be transparent and accountable. And we've really got to recalibrate the system. Graham Healy over and out. Have a look at my website, riseupaustraliabrisbane.com. I've got all the financial planning there. It's pretty basic and it's pretty simple. We can wipe out 125 taxes and just put a 2% transaction tax. Have a look at the page on the economy. Have a look at the plan for the Bradford scheme. Some of the other politicians I see have been banging on about that. We've been banging on about that for 10 years or more. So it's a big solution. Hydropower, there's a big future for Australia, but we've got to really get rid of the deadwood in Canberra, and we've got to re-sovereignise this country. We need a Donald Trump in this country, and it ain't any of the politicians that I see. I've predicted Twiggy Forrest will step up to the plate. And if Twiggy Forrest, you hear this broadcast, mate, I suggest that, well, you're a better expert than I am, but I suggest that, you have a look at re-establishing that rural bank in Australia that was funding small business, everything those plans you had before. And this is the time for you to step up and do something and save and repossess Australia. Okay, Graham Healy over and out. A little bit of a rant and rave. I was a little bit angry with stuff today, as you'll see in the broadcast, but I hope that's brought you up to date with a few things. Have a great day, and the next deadline that you'll see is the 30th of June. We're going to go down a rabbit hole globally, financially. The date after that will be August, September. So keep in mind those two dates. I will do probably, I'll do updating broadcasts, not on a daily basis, but when I feel to do them, and we'll go from there. Okay, Graham Healy over and out. Have a good day.